I love our intro. Old school. So Art Deco. Early 20th century.
Yes.
The good old days. Oh, wait.
And the planet wasn't boiling and we weren't all going to die imminently.
Yeah.
In some fiery...
The Weimar times.
Yeah.
They were good times. Good times. So, high crimes in high places. What about that mugshot? That's it. He's winning. Trump's going to win. 24. We'll see. Obviously, everyone's depending on where you are, you polarize one way or the other. You react one way or the other. Rachel Maddow, check out this. This is her reaction. Just seeing the photo.
Jesus Christ. Yeah,
I know.
Go on.
She's an extreme example, but supposedly, right? She's MSNBC TV anchor, so this is theoretically a centrist position. You know, average Joe, right? Let's have a listen.
Former President Trump would be treated like anybody else, that he would get a Fulton County mugshot like everyone else. Well, just now, in the last few moments, the sheriff has released that mugshot from former President Trump. And so I'm saying we should slow down here just for a second, because this is serious stuff for the nation, for who we are as a country. We have never before had a mugshot of a United States president, current or former, but now we do. Here it is. Whoa. I have to admit, that is a dangerous man. Oh my God. I mean, I know I'm a lesbian, but this man just made me feel like a woman. You know what I mean? God. He's so sexy. What a dangerous, sexy beast. Look at those eyes. Oh my God. Melania is a lucky lady.
Is it?
That's it.
Yeah. Well, she's obviously being sarcastic, right? But
Is she?
well, yeah.
So
I
what?
know I'm a lesbian, but you know.
Right. Okay,
Yeah,
she's
she
being
made me-
sarcastic.
Yeah.
So she's this.
She's learned a bit from over the past few years of her being ridiculously, like, apparently and honestly hysterical about certain things, and she got lampooned for it, you know. So I think she's learned to, at least
I couldn't tell.
She can
You
still,
could. Okay.
Well, when she's saying I'm a lesbian, but this man is making me feel like, you know, I could turn straight, basically, because he's such a sexy, dangerous beast.
But is she saying that? Okay. Well, what's the point of her sarcasm?
She's just making fun of him. As, like, he's trying to be.
She's trying to make fun of a reaction she's picked up on that people are finding it attractive.
I don't know. I don't know if people are finding it attractive. I mean, I don't find it attractive. I don't think.
No, me neither. But
I don't think a lot of people find it attractive. I just think that they thought it was kind of cool that he had this kind of like bring it on kind of face. You know what I mean?
Right.
But she's then turning it into a kind of like making fun of him by, as if, you know, characterizing him as trying to appear aggressive and masculine, and so manly and bring it on. I'm the president. I'm gonna drain the swamp type thing. And she's kind of making fun of him for playing up a macho face type thing, you know,
right.
like as if saying I'm a lesbian. He's so scary and masculine. He'd even turn me straight, basically, and I'm a lesbian, you know. But yeah,
Okay. So that's nothing. Bear. I thought that was on the level. I can't tell with them anymore.
yeah. Well, especially Rachel Maddow, like, because
Yeah,
she has a history of being hysterical about things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. She's from a world I don't live in. There's actually the mugshots began rolling out because there's a whole slew of people who were formally indicted. Trump was one of the last. Somebody posted here the full suite of the mugshots from Georgia, Fulton County Jail. Trump's top left, of course. Giuliani recognized his was first. The woman was. Most of them were lawyers. They were his legal team at the time. You recognize middle right, release the Kraken.
Yeah.
Check out bottom left. I thought it was a priest at first. I checked it out. He's a pastor, local pastor.
Bottom
And
left.
He's charged
yeah, right.
He's charged with trying to intimidate a witness.
Right.
Specifically, it's one of the women who was later ID'd on video coming in at night to one of the polling centers in Fulton County and opening a briefcase. And ostensibly it showed, that's what everyone assumed at the time, because that's what you could see her doing on the video. It showed her basically taking little sheafs of ballots and stuffing them into a counting machine. You remember those? That was bombshell. That would have normally been, but then we switched timelines and they said, no, that's not what you see. And anyone who thinks that is a crazy kook conspiracy theorist who thinks that the government would ever dare to rig an election. The pastor was charged with, at the time, maybe you can understand, I can sympathize with him. He was like, okay, she's obviously guilty. He did go to her house or something. It was to get her to basically confess. Come on, you're on tape. Just don't. I don't know. You're in dangerous waters here or something. It wasn't her pastor per se. They didn't have a relationship, a prior one. So maybe he shouldn't have stuck his nose in or something. She got the cops to come and tell him to go away, and he's ended up on the same indictment.
Right.
He was trying to keep the peace. He wasn't like a political operator at all.
Right.
But here we are, 3 years later, and he's got a mugshot too.
Yeah. Well, obviously, the point of having a list of indictees is to kind of like, lower the tone of the whole thing. It's a parade of criminals, basically, right? It's not just one president. They didn't want to have just Trump there because that makes it smack more of politically motivated and political harassment. So it's much better to have this long list of people to show this was a collective conspiracy. So Trump's basically kind of like a gang leader, and these are the gang members that he was involved with in his attempted heist of the Georgia election. That's I think that's the motivation for putting all these other people on the ticket, and of course they're getting a lot of media traction as a result of it and all that kind of stuff. The whole point of this is just to basically make a as they've done so many other times. I mean, that's what the media is for. Media periodically serves the purpose of trial by media, right? For the Washington establishment, someone they don't like, they create they find the charges, whatever, they trump up the charges in one way or another. It's funny that word trumped up charges, isn't it?
Yeah.
That was like long before Trump, right? I
know.
wonder what the origin of Trump at something that's being trumped up. The universe has a...
Maybe because the verb to trump up, I think, is to hype up something.
Yeah, exactly. Trumped up charges that's what that means. But I'm wondering, where it originally comes from, where the word,
That the phrase.
Like Trump.
Trumped up charges.
Trump means fake charges, right? Uh-huh. It's kind of ironic.
And Donald Trump has,
and I'm sure the word
40 charges altogether.
Right.
4 indictments.
I'm sure the word is long predates Donald Trump, but it's just kind of like a funny coincidence. So it's trial by media. Like they do it so often, have done it so often. Trial by media.
To restate where we think this is, do you think there's any action? A casual impression would suggest 4 indictments now, 40 charges, more to come. I'm not sure. Covering January 6th election fraud claims. That's this latest one in Georgia. One was a handsy-pansy rape case from the 90s.
Yeah, that was separate, yeah. That wasn't federal.
Right. Do you think this broad scattershot, obviously it's it's to do with next year's election, but functionally, literally, in an actual, do you think it would collapse onto one of them hopefully sticking and in some way legally ruling out Trump's candidacy?
Well, I mean, that's...
Is that the goal? Is there a logic to what we can see as outside observers is illogical because it's only increasing his support? It's backfiring electorally, but legally it might win.
But that's just gearing it up to create a shitstorm, like, you know what I mean, where you bring more and more charges, or you continue to bring charges against a very popular presidential candidate, and in bringing more and more charges against him, you end up increasing his popularity or strengthening his popularity amongst the people who already support him. But at the same time, you increase the chance that you're going to be able to make something stick and possibly prevent him from running for the presidential election. Which, just like the two together are a clash. Obviously, they don't go together, right? You're it's like someone is in doing this is deliberately attempting to create a situation where the chances of some kind of civil unrest or some kind of significant event I mean, much more significant than January 6th. You know, the insurrection. Something more closely approximating an actual insurrection from happening. That's what you're doing, right? In doing this. I mean, if you asked, is the point to prevent him from being able to run? Well, like, check this out. This spans 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, everyone's different. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 different mainstream media, all on song. As a result, I'll just read them out. Could Trump's criminal cases keep him off the ballot? After indictment, could Trump get tossed off the ballot? Is Trump ineligible to run in 2024? The Supreme Court could decide. Why the Constitution could block Trump from running in 2024. Debate rages over whether the 14th Amendment disqualifies Trump. Legal scholars increasingly raise constitutional argument that Trump should be barred from running for the election. Donald Trump's actions have already disqualified him from the presidency. GOP will lose with Trump, New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu warns. And can Trump be disqualified from the presidency? Why even conservative legal experts are in favour of it. So that would suggest, I mean, if you take the establishment media as being a read on what the establishment wants and what the point and what they're referring to here is obviously these charges, then clearly these charges are designed to prevent Trump from running for election. Not because legally he should be disallowed, or objectively he should not be allowed to run for president, but these charges are, have been fabricated to one extent or another, in the context of like other presidents wouldn't have been, like for example with keeping the secret documents at home, they made a big issue of that.
The fourth one.
I mean, another president who was a darling of the establishment would not be in this position as Trump is in at all. He would maybe get a slap on the wrist and be done. So
like Obama and his chef, right in the middle of all this.
Yeah. So
he's dead.
Yeah. So no other president would have gotten this. Establishment president would have gotten this treatment. So obviously the point of giving him this treatment is to prevent him to try and prevent him from running. But like you said, that's dangerous because people aren't for backing down. His supporters are not for backing down. But of course,
never mind his supporters. Have you seen all the videos of like Boys in the Hood? Maybe, I mean, who knows? I just happen to see a lot of them. But apparently TikTok's full of short videos made by gangsters and gangster wannabes, and ex-gangsters and all sorts. They're saying the reaction here in the hood is like, wow, they really hate him. Okay, we're going to vote for him just cause. I mean, that's a backfire. Like, for example, a real world, and never mind the supporters, of course they're all behind him, but the way it could actually increase support, and right there you would have a potential snafu. Just thinking in non-linear terms. So the last time it was key that the operation went smoothly for ballot harvesting, right? What if the streets are smart to that and they get in the way of that physically happening?
Yeah, it's cumulative. Obviously, the last two elections have been fraught with scandal and all sorts of allegations of election rigging and ballot stuffing and all that kind of stuff. So people are primed. Like this one way or another, next year's is going to be fraught with. It's going to be scandalous in one way or another. It's going to be
huge.
It's going to be huge. It's going to be ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, just to make the point, this is pretty simple, but I mean, obviously, it's a valid. It's just an infographic, but it's a valid. Statement basically. Hillary, Biden, and his son, all of whom clearly have and currently Hillary had, and evidence. There was plenty of evidence to at least begin court proceedings or hand out some indictments against her and see where the chips fell. Biden, certainly stuff coming out now. His son Hunter, of course. But there's nothing happening to those people because those three people are establishment politicians. This is the Washington establishment. It's a group, a clique unto itself, and it effectively, it's tied to it's controlled in a certain sense, or intricately tied to the intel agencies who effectively run the United States of America. Those three at the top are establishment favourites. The guy at the bottom clearly isn't, and it's sad because I mean, the only reason the guy at the bottom has those indictments is because he actually wanted to be president. He wanted to do what it says the president does. He wanted to wield the power that the Constitution says the president can actually wield. And he tried to do that, and that's the result.
Yeah.
So, the issues are far too important, as who was it once said, Kissinger, I think, about Chile. The issues are far too important here to allow the population to decide in an election who gets to be president or who doesn't. He said that about Allende in the early 70s, Salvador Allende, when the CIA basically overthrew him and installed Pinochet. Kissinger said that the issues, you can look it up, look the quote, he said the issues here. That's always the way it's always been. This is about geopolitics and about America's position in the world, and America running the world effectively, and handing out orders to everybody else being subservient. So it's very important that America maintains that control, has been for many years, that America maintains that control over populations. And of course, it's equally as important in the country itself, at home in America, that it maintains control over the the course of the direction that the country takes. They've never had that problem, if you know what I mean. Like in all the years, really up until Trump, they've never had that problem that they had in other countries, because of course you have much more control within your own country, right? They had problems in other countries because obviously they don't, fully have full presence in those countries, and they had to overthrow governments and stage all sorts of coups and different interventions in different countries to maintain control in those countries. But America itself, they never had that problem until Trump came along. And now they're basically having to do similar things inside America that they've done in other countries over the past 70 or 80 years. Except in America, they have to be a bit more gentle, a bit more cautious about it. They can't just have a coup, right? They can't just overthrow the government. They can't just, they can't just put together a bunch of, left-wing Antifa types and go and stage a coup and kick out the government, kick out Trump, for example, and have new elections. I mean, it all has to be done by the proper process. And in fact, they did the opposite, right? So you see how they're managing it in the US quite differently. They have to be much more subtle. And in fact, in the US, what they did, rather than actually go through the process that they had, like I said, they'd done in other countries, where they just put together a group who would go and overthrow the government, they created a situation where the supporters of Trump, the guy they wanted to oust, were made to look as if they were trying to overthrow the government, right? So they turn it around and use the same playbook, but with a different different approach to it, so that it's more about demonizing their enemy within America, whereas in other countries they'll also demonize them, but they'll simply first and foremost try and kick him or her out of power in other countries, violently.
They're very clever.
They are
very clever. The question is, does that cleverness continue perpetually and continue to cleverly outsmart everyone? Is it like Karl Rove is supposed to have said, you all will just be left to study what we do perpetually behind us?
Well, it's a delusion to think that you would perpetually be able to do that, because it implies that you believe that the population that you're hoodwinking or manipulating have no ability to learn or to see or to figure out what you're doing. At least the segment of the population who is awake to that and is looking at that they'll never figure it out. We can continue to do, and of course, the more and more you do it, the more lies you build up, the more of a backlog of lies and manipulation that you build up, more evidence you provide for what you're doing, and you assume that people will just be like, oh yeah, I don't see anything here. I mean, obviously, as dumbed down as people are, there's at least a portion of them still have the ability to go, hang on a minute, that's a bit suspect, and then you add to it, that's more suspect, that's even more suspect, and these people are getting a build-up of evidence that the system under which they live is corrupt and has been manipulating and lying and deceiving them. And what are they going to do, though? That's the question. The big question is, what do people ultimately do? Is there a breaking point? Yeah. They try and contain. They show that they have awareness that they have to contain that. So they know that they have to kind of cover their tracks, but they tend to do it just by smearing people. They try to, Hillary Clinton's deplorable, just dismiss those people who are the conspiracy theorists, the people who are accusing us of doing these things that we're obviously doing, just dismiss them, have the media dismiss them. But they've done that for quite a long time, and now those people have become, in a certain sense, immune to that smearing.
Yeah.
Well, they just don't care anymore. They try to smear Trump, obviously, over and over again, but it's got to the point where the more and more they smear Trump, like we're just saying, that's actually is read at this point as evidence by his supporters that what you're accusing him of is false, and you're the one who's doing that effectively.
Yeah.
The more you try to tell us that he's no good, the more we believe he's good. Because when you say we distrust you, the establishment, so much that when you call someone a bad name, we turn it around and think that that person must be good.
Yeah. That's literally one of the gangster videos said, the more you indict, the more we unite.
Right.
I presume he meant we as in everybody.
Whoever.
Anyone in this country.
Yeah.
So,
it's crazy. So,
the day before he surrendered to Georgia. Fulton.
I surrender.
That's the legal term.
Yeah.
To Fulton County Jail was the Fox News, the first debate for the Republican Party candidates. Glossy Fox News studio, they're all there talking the issues out, moving their hands. And Trump just said, I'm not going. And instead, of course, he spoke to Tucker Carlson in a short interview that's now had 260 million views.
Right.
Whatever exactly that means on Twitter, but it's still one of the most watched. It's obviously the most watched political anything ever.
On Twitter, yeah, or maybe anywhere, yeah.
I think so. An interview, he didn't even say much that was new. It was just that it was Trump on TV, except it wasn't TV. It was Tucker Carlson's sauna.
Right.
But it obviously dwarfed any TV ratings, especially for the focus, the spotlight, the official spotlights over here on the candidates. These are the candidates. Don't listen to those two. He's fired and the other guy is going to jail. But that's in fact where the real actual spotlight of people was focused on. That's really
Twitter supposedly has 450 active monthly active users.
450? Jesus, that's low. Million, you mean?
450 million, yeah.
Oh, million, okay.
Not 450. 450 million. So out of that 450 million, 260. Yeah, but even if you have that, it's still a massive amount of people. It dwarfs the kind of coverage that the mainstream media gets,
Tucker was trying to, just get him on the issue. So he was asking him, just seriously, what do you think about this and that? And Trump, either he's tired or he said it a million times and he's just like, well, he didn't have the same energy about it. But I remember at one point he just said, in response about, all these indictments coming at you, and he says, well, they're savages. These people are, how can you say these people are savages? Blah, 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 said some more stuff. But that's all he had to say. Maybe that's all he needs to say.
Yeah. Well, at this point, yeah.
Psychologically, he's close to actually identifying the nature. That is what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
A completely atavistic, non-human, non-normal human person kind of milieu. And and he can just, that's all he needs to say. What's the next question,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the lines have been long since really been drawn, There's no more discussion to be had, between the red team and the blue team type thing, when it comes down to people who actually, are active, politically and engaged. So yeah, it's what is it? It's soon to be a year, but obviously it'll get going next year, relatively soon, and the court, these indictments are leading up to a court case, probably next May or something like that, sometime May, early June maybe. So at the height of it, as others are campaigning and there's all sorts of polls, who's leading and who's not, and it's around that same time that each of the two
in June,
parties will pick or decide who's going to be vote for who's going to be the Republican, the Democrat candidate. You know, you get RFK Jr. in the mix there. Biden obviously is running again. The whole thing's just ridiculous. Like, I mean, it's a shit show. Like, I mean, I can understand. I don't think most people. Some people have turned away, but all the people who just aren't paying any attention to it because it's just politics, it's just nonsense, have that attitude. They're not wrong. Like, I mean, they're missing. In not watching it more closely and investigating it and trying to figure out what's what, they're missing an opportunity to see just how messed up it is and see the true nature of the beast type thing. But their general blink that they've had for a long time, and which is that those politicians are all a bunch of liars and crooks and stuff, is not wrong, you know. And I can understand and forgive anybody for just looking away from it, but you know, it's going to have real world effects on people's lives. You know what I mean? Ultimately, if things go really pear-shaped and stuff, you know, you might have a situation where you have, you know, no president next year, and who knows, there could be some civil disturbance. You might have martial law instituted. You know, and there's all sorts of other things brewing in the background in terms of economic crises. You know, there may be some environmental issues, all that kind of stuff. Who knows exactly what could happen? But it all seems to be coming to a head to the point where, you know, some kind of crisis point is going to be reached.
Yeah, we've been saying that for years, but it's still the case. But it's just that these things take time. Here's someone speaking up on the economic front. Now that you mentioned it, the big time investor who is credited with predicting the 2008 crisis, Michael Burry, made famous. That's the actor playing him in the movie The Big Short. Hedge fund manager Michael Burry stakes 90% of his portfolio with a $1.6 billion bet against Wall Street. He says it's coming, though.
Crash is coming.
Right.
Sky's falling. Yeah, well, it's one of those things where you hear people saying the sky's falling. You know, obviously climate change, global warming, the economy, etc., etc. People have been saying it for years, like you said, and it's the boy who cried wolf scenario, right? Where people just go, yeah, people have been saying that the end is coming, the end is nigh for a long time. Not least the biblical guys and the literal end is nigh biblical people, but people have been predicting that, what we were just saying, that idea of something coming to a head, coming to a crisis, and there being a bit of a foobar in the relatively near future. And people have heard that a long time, so they don't pay attention to it anymore. They say, yeah, I heard that a lot, so whatever. Ignore it, which probably isn't a good idea. It's a good idea if you look around, if you're paying attention, you can see that, well, actually, these people are just fear-mongering, and I don't see any real evidence that things are going to go downhill. But if things are going in that direction, you don't want to be looking away. You know what I mean? I mean, it doesn't matter that you've heard it many times over many years that you know, things are going to collapse. You still want to be paying attention if and when they do actually collapse. You know what I mean? Or at least paying attention to and the run up to it. You know, because everybody will be paying attention when they do collapse. If it does collapse, nobody will be.
It's certainly collapsing locally in some places. Do you have anything to add about the Maui fire? Because people are speculating that it's deliberate. We covered it briefly but that was 2 weeks ago. Since then, well, the most substantive counterclaims are there was no warning system, but that's a fact.
Right.
They don't deny that the sirens didn't go off due to power failure. Okay. The second one is that water was withheld from firefighting services for far too long for some reason, and there was a bureaucratic reason for it rather than a physical one.
Right.
That's dodgy, I agree. The third one is that really, well, lots of people have said it who were there, and there is one video to support it, that police were instructed to turn people evacuating, driving out of the town, back into it. But that's like, I don't know, I'm not sure what that's suggesting, that that's murder. I mean, that the police officers, well, not just police, but actual physical roadblocks, apparently, at both ends of the town, kept people in there.
Yeah.
Dot, dot, dot. What's that implying? Officers were willfully killing people? You know, that's a heck of a leap to make. I can believe that idiocy, incompetence led to an absolute foobar in trying to evacuate.
Yes.
Especially as the fire was spreading so fast. The basic explanation, and it's been buttressed by a new report published by AP today, that the fire was caused by the high winds knocking out downing power lines. Started a fire, it spread quickly, done. Does that sound about right? I mean, part of the AP's report was, well, you know, it's kind of old, like overhead power lines as opposed to burying them underground. That's kind of 1960s tech. It was overdue to be, but I mean, look all around us here. I mean, the power lines are overhead.
Yeah,
We've had storms; they don't blow over.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and certainly they don't start fires when they do necessarily. You know.
This is the thing: when you home in on any one incident, Maui in this case, it's hard to say. You can understand why people there are pissed. Far too many people died. They didn't get enough help on time. They didn't get much help in the way of emergency support afterwards. But to leap from there to that's because they wanted to kill us all because they wanted to take the property. I don't know.
I still like, simply because it's very easy to do. In any of these wildfires, it's I always leave it open, and I think it's quite likely that someone is setting them. You know what I mean? You just need a handful of people, really, with some gasoline and a lighter, more or less, or whatever, some kind of incendiary device to start fires in a certain way that makes them much, much worse. Because, like, if you imagine a fire starting from a down power line, it's going to start spreading from one area where the power line went down
In one direction.
towards in the direction of the prevailing winds.
Yeah.
So it's in that sense, it's kind of sweeping people out of its way, right? I mean, or it's engulfing people, you know, in a certain direction. But it's kind of obviously it's much worse when a fire would almost
Encircle
a group of people. They have nowhere to run. They can't run in any direction, and you end up having people in Maui run into the sea.
Yeah.
Which suggests that this fire, if it was started by an electrical power line, then it kind of ended up, for some reason,
Encircling the town.
encircling the town or a certain area of the town. You know, so yeah, it's definitely suspicious to me. And I mean, again, this is just a blink, and this is the way I read a lot of situations that are going on in the world today, because, you know, when you don't have access to that minutiae of what was actually going on, like we said last time, I look at them talking up the fires all around the world and combining it with their global warming, man-made global warming propaganda, and how we're all going to die as a result of that, and we have to do something about it. We have to impose all these different new, you know, a lot of different legislation that is, you know, obviously not good for people. It changes people's lives in a not positive way. It basically curtails their freedoms. That's the general line of force of all of these new policies around climate change and global warming, is to curtail people's freedoms by necessity, of course. Similar to COVID, right? It's just one of these acts of nature, act of God, whatever you want to call it, and there's no one to blame, and we have to just knuckle down and accept that we're going to be locked in our homes, or we're going to have to stop doing this, you know. So it's a curtailment of freedom overall. So when I see them talking up the heat this whole summer, and then I see these spate of 5 or 6 different wildfires in different places around the world, and then I see the media reporting on at least a few of them in different places, most recently in Greece, but previously in Rhodes, that in Rhodes anyway, almost all of them were set by someone. And there's wildfires right now in Greece, and the government there has said that they've arrested 79 or almost 80 people for setting these fires, and it's like that's kind of crazy. And someone actually, do I have it here somewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually on surprise on CNN. Of course, you'd think that would be the kind of the detail that we're going to look at here in this article would be what they run with in the headline, but of course they don't. The headline they run with is a losing battle to save the lungs of Athens. Sorry, a losing battle to save the lungs of Athens as wildfires grip Greece. So that's from today. And if you just scroll down to the end there, it's the second last paragraph. So blah blah blah, global warming, and then down the end, and no references in the title. Alongside the wind, firefighters are also facing a more malign ally to the flames. Incredibly, some of the fires seem to have been set deliberately. Police have made 79 arson-related arrests so far. Now, they say some of them, but 79?
It's a lot of people. For a small country, I mean...
And it says their disbelief is beginning to turn to anger among many Greeks. Dr. Diakakis questioned the motives of those behind these acts. I cannot believe these people are all simply arsonists, he said. Why are they doing this? So
eco-terrorists.
But that's it. So when I put those things together, like I said, the context in which it's happening in terms of the propaganda around global warming and we're all going to die and the earth is unbreathable and the heat is unbearable and it's global boiling now, apparently, according to the UN. And then you see them highlighting these fires as evidence for global boiling because it's quite dramatic and it's in people's faces. And then you see significant evidence of people setting fires. I don't think it's unreasonable to conclude that there may well be some people with vested interests who are actually setting these fires. Because it's like, I mean, seriously, when you have a parched landscape with grasses that are all brown and dry, and then you have a strong wind for a few days, it's the easiest thing to do to start a fire. So the idea that you discount that is crazy.
Yeah.
So that's why I would say in terms of Maui, I would certainly leave open the possibility that someone set fires in Maui as well.
Yeah, and the prevailing alternative motive for that would be land appropriation.
Right.
And there is a real political on-the-ground battle about that.
Mm-hmm. In Maui, yeah.
David Martin, you remember him? Baldy guy with the bow tie who exposed the history of patent technology that led up to COVID.
Mm-hmm.
He reckons that many wildfires, and he's commenting on it globally here, they're probably being deliberately fanned, pun intended, to support a trend of land appropriation. That'll be like what's happening in Maui.
Mm-hmm.
But more generally, what was the historical example he gave? Oh, I've forgotten now. It's happened in the past,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so since then, Canada's been raging all summer, but since Maui on August 8th, 9th, 10th, there was a big Kelowna fire.
Kelowna,
Southern BC, Kelowna. Headlines, Guardian here. Canada is enduring its worst wildfire season. That's what the headline says. We opened the article, I'm like, give me the data. How do you know it's the worst one ever, But you can actually go to charts like on the Canadian government wildfires database. 1989 was the worst one in the last 100 years by number of fires and area burned. So how can they claim worst? But like you said, it's more like the overall feel the media is pushing is this really feels bad. It's global boiling. It's a political statement made by the head honcho of the UN, right?
Mm-hmm.
There have been wildfires in Turkey now. Greece was last month, Turkey this month. One erupted Louisiana. I don't think it's major, but still it got headlines. It reminded me of one I commented on Twitter in France in June, I think. It was so small. I mean, it was just basically like a couple of hectares, and it was quickly put out next to a highway in southern France. And it got this spurt of global headlines. people in Louisiana and California and New York got to hear about this wildfire in France. And then it went away. It was gone. That's all. It's off the news. Because I looked in the details, it was tiny. It was quickly put out. You know. And that some of them are huge, though. Some of them really have, you know, torched a lot of places. I find, it's so hard when there's so much noise around the subject to get a solid read on it. But here's something I came across at the level of narrative making about this topic. This is Project Veritas. They got a CNN producer on tape 2 years ago in 2021, so it's still COVID time, right? Where that's what was getting all the clicks. And the guy was talking about how they'd be moving onto the climate next. I think if you scroll down.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just like a COVID fatigue. So like whenever a new story comes up, they're going to latch onto it. They've already announced in our office that once the public will be open to it, we're going to start focusing mainly on climate. Climate, like global warming, and like that's going to be our next like I don't know, like what's the
Bullshit.
It's going to be our focus. Our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying it, that's what it was, right? So our next thing is going to be for climate change awareness.
What does that look like?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I have a feeling it's just going to be like constantly showing videos of like decline in ice and weather warming up and like the effects it's having on the economy and really
Who
talking
decides that?
the head of the network, like just
Who's that? Is that Zucker?
Zucker, yeah. I imagine that he's got his council and they've all like discussed like where they think
So that's like the next.
pandemic like story like that will beat to death. But that one's got longevity. You know what I mean? It's not like there's a definitive ending to the pandemic, or like it'll taper off to a point that it's not a problem anymore. Probably think it's going to take years, so they'll probably be able to milk that for quite a bit.
So climate change overload.
Be prepared. It's coming. Stories like right now, we had an inside.
Cut it there. He's got
right
some
now.
more comments, but we got the gist of it there. Yeah, climate change overload. So he knew it was coming in 2021, but then that wouldn't have been hard because that has been an incremental story
For sure.
for a decade or more, even. So.
Yeah. And of course, it's about ratings, right? It's about clicks, right? I mean, this is the problem where you can't necessarily accuse. I mean, you can if you want, but you can't totally claim that the mainstream media is only pushing these sensationalist stories of doom and gloom for the purpose of some kind of Orwellian mind control and population control or whatever, or to push through certain agendas that are vested interests, money making agendas. They're doing it for money, but at least a major aspect of it is for their own bank balance, because scary stories sell, right? Scary stories get attention. So the media is always looking for a scary story to push in the faces of the people, and they have, but that's not responsible journalism anyway, right? It's like you're meant to be, the media is meant to be nuanced and provide, the facts and something closer to the truth or more balanced perspective on something than you get from, say, politicians or people who clearly do have vested interests, or companies, right? Who would have a vested interest in certain things. The media is meant to be independent, right? And just like, look, we've looked into this, and here's the balanced approach, But you don't get that because for one anyway, and this is giving them an out in a certain sense by saying they're just greedy and they want to sell scary stories, so they're not going to give you a balanced approach. They're going to give you the scariest a perspective, because it gets readers, and that means advertising revenue. And that's leaving aside any vested Machiavellian interest they have.
Some end goal that's unspoken.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I got more on the economy, but maybe we should
the economy.
talk about. Meanwhile, in Russia, in the United States, they do coups through lawfare,
Right.
Because they're civilized. In Russia, politics is a bit different.
Yes,
Right.
in Russia, everything different.
Prigozhin is dead, Joe. Did you predict that?
Jesus, I did, yeah.
You didn't even. You predicted that he would be.
I was being too lenient. I
Put-
said he was going
put to pasture.
He was going to jail. I
And
said
now
he was
he's
going
dead.
to jail. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Or is it? It's Russia.
No, that's the way of the world, So,
By the way, just today, it is confirmed. There was a couple of days there that technically it wasn't confirmed, even though Putin had already said something. There's a Russian forensic report. He's definitely one of the 10 dead. Yevgeny Prigozhin is dead. Shot out of the sky. Bomb on board.
well, the question of what caused the crash of the plane or the downing of the plane is kind of really important, because it would give you an indication of who was likely responsible. It would either narrow it down to, really only one suspect in a sense, or it would, if it was shot down by a missile, if it was a bomb, then it opens it up to speculation as to who might have been responsible. So that's really important information that we have to wait on and find out, right? Because if it was shot down, obviously it was shot down quite close to Moscow, right? So, of course, you could allow for maybe some saboteurs or whatever with a manpad. Chances are, if it was a missile that was launched quite close to Moscow, then given the current climate and how tightly that kind of thing is controlled, it would suggest that it was someone aligned with the Kremlin or close to the Kremlin or whatever. Someone within the Russian establishment did it. It was a bomb that was put on the plane in. Well, actually, it came from Moscow. It was flying from Moscow to St. Petersburg, right? It was a bomb. It kind of. I mean, I suppose the jet was probably in Africa a day or two previously. Could have been put on there by some malign actors or something like that. But then, would it?
But then why? How would
it remain undetected? Does Prigozhin and those heads of Wagner not have a certain security protocol where certain things like that would be checked every now and again? I mean, when you know your life's, I mean, like in Northern Ireland, growing up, I know it was a longer term conflict in Northern Ireland. It went on for 30 years, but even relatively quickly at the beginning of it, like, various people who were involved in the conflict, including police officers and other paramilitary types, and any politicians who were at all in the line of fire, potentially, like every morning when they get up, before they get in their car, all of them had a long kind of stick with a mirror on the end of it to check underneath their car for a bomb. It just became routine. That's what you do every single
put
morning.
the kettle on, check the car?
If you've left your car anywhere for any more than a few hours or more than half an hour,
Well,
you have to check your car.
In this case, the plane apparently went for repairs. at
yeah,
the
but even
airport.
then, all the more reason to check, right?
Right.
I mean, if I say, again, in Northern Ireland, you send your car in for fucking repairs, you check it twice, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I would be surprised if that kind of security protocol wasn't being followed and stuff, So it's very complicated in terms of trying to figure out right now
Well, the way you're teeing it up there, it's a very professional. It comes from very high up.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, you can just look at it you look at what's actually gone on over the past 5 or 6 months relating to Wagner and the Kremlin. Obviously, Wagner were very naughty, and especially Prigozhin and the others at the head of Wagner who supported him in his abortive mutiny back in June.
June 26th.
His abortive mutiny.
He was killed 2 months to the day.
Right. And then previous to that, his ranting on study posts on social media and videos, ranting a few months before that in March and April, where he's throwing lots of nasty shade at Shoigu and others in the Defense Department, the MOD in Russia publicly. Like you mentioned, calling Shoigu the defense minister a paedophile and an old goat and an old grandpa, lots of nasty words and stuff, screaming and shouting at him and accusing them of killing all these Wagner soldiers that are right behind me and all this kind of stuff. I mean, that's just not the way you. If you're like a serious person who's seriously committed to the endeavors of the Russian
cause.
armed forces that you're a part of, at least nominally, but not officially because you're a private military company and separate. If you're committed to that, you don't do that. Do you know what I mean? You take your grievances separately. You know what I mean? And if you can't have your grievances heard, if you can't get access to Putin or Shoigu, which I doubt, I think he probably could and did have that access in a certain sense. At least he could make his frustrations or annoyances known to the Kremlin, and they would hear it, and then they would respond.
They could have had it go slow,
right?
Working in Bakhmut. Instead, they went further and further into the city. I mean,
right, yeah. But that was their choice, and I mean, obviously, that was decided between them, and or maybe not. Who knows? That maybe that was part of it. But obviously, the Russian government wasn't unhappy about the fact that they committed a lot of forces to Bakhmut, to taking Bakhmut and stuff. But the way he handled it is just not the way. You're not a serious person. I mean, you can't. You're obviously a loose cannon. You're making it clear that you're a loose cannon, and loose cannons are not can't be tolerated. You know what I mean? In any properly well structured government and military hierarchy. Basically, there has to be someone in charge, and you have to, whether you like what they say or not. You can complain and say you want this and be angry and all that kind of stuff, but the bottom line is you accept the orders that come down. And that's what happens if you're officially a part of the Ministry of Defense. You swear an allegiance to Russia, and you're loyal no matter what happens, and you do your job. But that was a big beef with Wagner, right? That's why Prigozhin was complaining effectively over and over again, was that behind it he was complaining about weapons and all that kind of stuff, which seemed to be a ruse, because it seemed ultimately they got what they were complaining about. If there was an issue, they got the arms or the ammunition that they needed. But it seems that behind it the problem was, and it might have been going on for quite a while, was that Putin and Shoigu and the Russian government wanted Wagner to become a more integral and official part of the Russian armed forces, not a separate private military company that could and did do, in a certain sense, at times anyway, what it wanted, regardless of what the Russian government said, and was acting as a kind of free agent, But again, in the name, recognized internationally as these people are acting in the name, acting on behalf of Russia. They're representatives of the Russian government, they're representatives of the Russian military, but they don't follow orders. It's obviously not a tenable situation that anybody's going to live with, right? And that was the problem, and they didn't want to be incorporated into the Russian military because, as a private military company, and we know this from back in the day with Blackwater in Iraq,
they were making a killing.
Guys make a shitload of money, you know what I mean? They're acting independently in Africa. They're getting paid directly for their services in gold and other different currencies. And that's just not good, So it seems that was the problem, that they didn't want to become part of the Russian military, and the Russian government, and Putin specifically, was very clear that they had to incorporate themselves into the MOD, and they didn't want to. And the mutiny, the abortive mutiny, was them kind of like doubling down, throwing the gauntlet down in front of the Kremlin and saying,
the world's media.
Yeah, we're willing to do this. Like, we're willing to basically thumb our nose at you and say, fuck you. What are you going to do? We have the means and the motivation to really say no to you and mean it. And what are you going to do? We kind of have you over a barrel in a certain sense. You can't do anything to us. We're untouchable. So he has this kind of abortive mutiny, and all he does is they get officially sent into exile if they don't want to join the MOD. Putin said at the time, the ones who made this mistake of joining this kind of so-called mutiny, they made a mistake, and they can go home to their families. They can officially join the Ministry of Defence, the armed forces, or they can go to Belarus. Didn't say in exile, but that was effectively it. But obviously that didn't last, right? Because then, not long afterwards, Shoigu's flying out of there. Not Shoigu, but Prigozhin and others are flying out.
In less than a month, he
Right.
was in St. Petersburg co-hosting, like, shaking hands with African leaders,
Right.
who were
Yeah.
there for the Russia-Africa summit.
Right.
So what?
And he's trying to increase his profile and make himself out to be kind of like a representative of the Russian government. He's going to deal on behalf of the Russian government. But 50% for Wagner, right? 50-50. We'll split it with you. We'll split it with the government. 50 for us and 50 for you, right? We're private. We're a business-oriented company here. This is what we're doing. And so obviously, who's going to accept that? What serious government and military command is going to accept that state of affairs? They're not. But what do you do about it? If they have enough leverage and enough influence, what do you do about it?
And popularity, because Prigozhin had a mini media empire.
Exactly. So it seems to me that they themselves, Prigozhin and the Wagner chiefs themselves, put themselves in a position where there was no other option for the Russian government but to take the action of eliminating them in the way that they did. They could have made it. It could have been different, but they chose not to go that route. They thought they could play a game of chicken, basically, with the Kremlin, and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
Which was always going to be the case, which shows a level of stupidity or arrogance or delusion or wishful thinking on their part, that they thought that...
Maybe they thought Putin was a simp, that he would be a pussy. And
Yeah.
that's assuming he ordered this. I mean, I didn't want to believe that at first, because I thought, well, that's just the caricature of Putin organizing hits against his opposition. When you look into the detail of the most high-profile cases, it's bullshit. Like getting the opposition leader killed, opposition leader, tiny part-time politician, Boris Nemtsov, outside the Kremlin walls, led back to a Chechen gang. Implication was Putin ordered it. Like, he would have him shot dead in the head outside the walls of the Kremlin. Come on, think.
Yeah.
Then the more infamous ones, Litvinenko, the poisoning, you dug into that and showed that basically
MI5.
bullshit. The Skripals next to Salisbury,
Yeah. Again, MI5.
British chemical weapons proving ground. So there's a kind of a caricature teed up in everyone's mind for it. So that when I heard the news, I'm like, it can't be. Maybe this is actually the first time he has done it. And had to, like you said, there was no choice. That whole thing in the background where he was trying to get Wagner to
give them
rein him in,
give them plenty of opportunity.
Yeah. He made a statement after Thursday, I think, the day of. He both praised and criticized Prigozhin and said he had a complex fate, indeed. And the thing that you sent me yesterday is also a kind of a statement.
Yeah.
This is the whole story in the background.
I have it here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a few days later. I mean, whatever he said about in his, eulogizing of Wagner and stuff, like that kind of, that's the political or sensitive thing to do in a certain sense, the day of or the day after. But then within a couple of days, he gets to the point and it makes this statement, and it actually passed a law that Wagner mercenaries must swear allegiance to Russia. The decree applies to anyone participating in military activities in Ukraine or assisting the army in serving in territorial defence units. So he signed the decree on Friday, this past Friday, and it's just 2 days after Wagner leaders were presumed killed in a plane crash.
And so the logical thing is this decree couldn't have happened until Prigozhin was dead. He's dead, and then the decree is passed.
Right, because this was the issue.
Yeah.
That all along, like I mentioned, this was the issue of all along. It's like signing, swear allegiance to Russia means basically becoming officially, taking the oath in a certain sense, and officially becoming a member of the Russian armed forces. We are listed as an actual member of the Russian armed forces, and you're under the constraints of, you're in that chain of command, right? You're not outside it. So that's what this means, basically. And this was the bone of contention all along. So now that Prigozhin's out of the way, then he just makes. So he couldn't have said this because he would just have been. It was an ongoing debate, and he wasn't just going to state it. He had said it many times to Prigozhin and co. that you need to do this, but that was unofficially, right? Now that he's gone, it becomes official because Wagner officially now doesn't have a leadership. They have a leadership. It's the Ministry of Defence. So just get with the program and get involved there. And of course, it's not going to have any effect on their. In fact, it may actually make them more efficient in places like Africa and elsewhere. Because I'm pretty sure that Prigozhin and co weren't.
I can imagine they're taking money from both sides
Right.
in different conflicts.
Right.
Totally unreliable. Meanwhile, the counteroffensive. Lord of mercy. It's surely going to either peter out or reach its new month here. Here's a map of. It began beginning of June, so all summer now, almost 3 months, right? 40,000 dead Ukrainians just in this offensive. That's the official number. It's probably higher. There's the territory there. There's the battlefront. South is controlled by Russia. The Ukrainians are pushing from the north. You see the yellow spots? That's what Ukraine has taken back.
Which is nothing.
Nothing.
And they've lost massive amounts of.
It's nothing. It's
Um,
they were supposed to smash all the way to the sea.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah. No, yeah.
Well, I often complain about how you hardly hear any politicians, American politicians or Western politicians explaining clearly what the point of American backing and involvement in Ukraine is, what the point of the Western involvement in Ukraine, why it's so important, why are you willing to risk, in theory, nuclear Armageddon for everyone just for Ukraine? Who cares? Why do you care? Why is it so important? Of course, they usually give the big bullshit platitudes that Putin's an aggressor and we need to stand on. All they give is a moral argument, which is nonsense, complete and utter nonsense. That's not how the world works. That's not how power politics works on moral stances. You know what I mean? Mitt Romney, though, recently, basically came close. More or less explained it. There's a bit of bullshit towards the end, but you can have a listen. So he explains, and if people would only understand this, they might have a different perspective in Ukraine. They wouldn't be putting the Ukrainian flag on their bio and saying Putin must be stopped because killing is bad. Because that's clearly not the reason the US government is involved, at least according to Mitt Romney. And of course, this is really close to the truth. Have a listen.
The single most important thing we can do to strengthen ourselves relative to China is to see Russia defeated in Ukraine, because they are allies. And Russia being weakened weakens their ally China. I mean, and by the way, being able to take an amount which equals about 5% of our military budget, but actually less than 5% of our military budget each year to help the Ukrainians is about the best national defense spending I think we've ever done. We're losing no lives in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians are fighting heroically against Russia that has 1,500 nuclear weapons aimed at us. It's like, so we're diminishing and devastating the Russian military for a very small amount of money relative to what we spend in the rest of defense. A weakened Russia is a good thing. It tells China to rethink their territorial ambition. It tells Russia, perhaps most importantly, that the Putin vision of reestablishing the Russian Empire and grabbing the old former Soviet republics, that's not something that's going to work. It is very much in America's national interest, in our national interest to help Ukraine. And the best thing we can do for America is to see people who have nuclear weapons aimed at us getting weaker.
Right. So he tries to, make it real for the average American there that the reason we're in Ukraine, at the end he spins it as the reason we're in Ukraine is that Russia doesn't attack us with nuclear weapons, right? Which is obviously nonsense. But the rest of his monologue there was getting to the core of the matter, which was that this is about global power politics and America remaining kind of global hegemon and stopping. And what he said there, when he said that, the idea that, Putin trying to reestablish the Soviet Union and blah, 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 that's a lot of bullshit right there, obviously. What he should have said is that Russia trying to establish a multipolar world is not, he should have said, that's not going to fly. Because if Russia has increasing success with establishing a multipolar world along with China, then we Americans are going to take a serious economic hit, and our standing on the globe is going to be seriously downgraded,
Which
and
means
that will affect you, the average person in America.
Your dollar will
buy a lot less. So he should. He
That's
got
what
close.
if he had gone all the way. Yeah,
he should have said that. He should have said that, because then people would be able to make a choice clearly. They would realize that we're supporting Ukraine. And he said it's costing us very little money, and we're not losing any soldiers. Of course, Ukraine's probably lost 300,000 to 400,000 of its prime male citizens. Not to mention a lot of the country being destroyed. But America's okay with that because that's happening over there, and we don't care about Ukraine, right? We don't care. And Ukraine wouldn't be able to do this if we weren't supporting them. It would be long over, right?
So much for the moral stance.
Right, forget about the moral stance. This is purely about America and the American dollar, and how it relates to the average American is that you need to support this bloodbath in Ukraine, where effectively Russia is, slaughtering Ukrainian soldiers for the most part at a level of 7-8 to 1, basically. And that's fine because it secures the dominance of the American dollar, and therefore your purchasing power for the purchasing power for the average American in the world. So, American citizens, are you okay with that? Are you going to sign up for that? Are you going to put a Ukraine flag on your bio or on your social media account on that basis? Not on the basis of some bullshit, childish narrative that this is about, freedom and democracy and helping the poor Ukrainians who are under the threat of a big evil Russian bear who's trying to eat them. Because anybody would stand in and try and help a Ukrainian child who's being savaged by a Russian bear, right? You do that normally anywhere in the world, right? You just protect the weak, and it's moral, right? So that's not the reason that this is happening. And Mitt Romney just said it, and it's obviously is the fact of the matter. The reason is to maintain America's standard of living in a changing world, and to try and push back that change towards a more multipolar world where other people who are in a much less affluent position, or in less developed or who aren't as living as high in the hog, let's say, as they are in America, that those people in China and people in Russia and in other countries, they would be raised up economically, but in raising them up, Americans would have to take so that's a moral position, right? It's like, imagine you have lots of, move away from the bear attacking the child and how you would step in to stop that happening, and would you also take action if you were in a situation where, for example, you live in a very big house and you have like 4 cars and more food that you know what to do with, and a swimming pool and all the mod cons of modern civilization, but the person living, your next door neighbor, was living in poverty? Would you sacrifice some of your wealth in order to bring up the living standards of your neighbor, just as another human being? On that moral issue, you should remove the Ukrainian flag, and you should campaign against your government for supporting the war and perpetuating the war in Ukraine, if you want to make it a moral issue. That's effectively what it's about, because what Putin and Russia want to do, and what this Ukraine war is part of, is changing the world for an American-dominated world where Americans live high in the hog and other people in the world get second best, and changing that up so it's more balanced.
Yeah, it's a macrocosm of the fight that's taking place inside America as well.
Right.
The support for Trump isn't really a right-wing thing. It's actually...
It's already happening in America, yeah. And it's tied to it in that sense, you know what I mean? Where you have people
whose wealth is like...
through the roof.
Skyrocketing, while ordinary Americans...
A lot of ordinary Americans, particularly people in the Rust Belt and stuff, and that's what Trump is about. So these people are fighting for themselves, for their own self-interest, for their own wealth and power.
So they keep telling them it's for America, it's for you, it's not, it's for a few.
It's for them. And in fact, in doing what they're doing, not only are they aiming to continuing to keep all the people in the world in a relatively impoverished state, but they're also ensuring that a lot of people in America 40, 50, 60 million Americans continue in a relatively, compared to the standard of living in America, in a relatively depressed economic situation. So yeah,
It's not working. There was
No.
a BRICS summit this week, and there's now 6 new members of BRICS. We can't call it BRICS anymore. There's Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran and Saudi Arabia together, and the UAE. I mean, yeah, it's not working. But even that's okay. So that's an interesting development. Didn't get much traction in the West. It is objectively interesting. It's a statement of intent, I suppose. Those countries together are almost half of the world's population. Even as things stand, despite having much poorer populations than Western countries, they make up almost 40% of global GDP
right.
by dollar standards, right? But it's almost like I said, a declaration of intent. That's to do with the future. Objectively, what's been happening for over a decade is that the key purchaser of stuff, the major 2 trade locations, the United States maybe as consumer and China as producer, is that the use of the dollar in that trade exchange has plummeted.
Right.
I saw the graph. I don't have it with me, I'm afraid, but this is easy to check out. There's nothing hidden about it. It's anyone can find it. The turning point was 2018 for the first time. I think for the first time, the use of the dollar by China dropped below half for all of its trade with the United States, which meant that the United States was having to purchase in Chinese currency for goods. Anyway, that's now gone way. That's continued year on year on year, all through COVID. Objectively, dollar hegemony is no longer the case. I think you'll see other stats that still say, well, 3/4 of all the world's major resources like oil and gas are still conducted.
It's like turning the ship around,
But for the actual trade of the high-end goods, the actual products that are made at the other end of the chain from the natural resources, starting there, it's already flipped. And that will probably work its way back through the supply chains. And once it's eating into the US dollar, the petrodollar, and the US dollar as the currency used to trade energy more generally, it is curtains. That's an objective process that's been happening that precedes, it really arguably precedes even Xi Jinping coming along in 2012.
Right.
That's why when the Russians make these statements about objective historical processes, and they're so calm, the media makes it look like it's all on foobar for Russia going to lose in Ukraine, it's so bad. And they're just cool as a cucumber up there because they're like, we're watching history. And then the 2 guys, when they met in Moscow in March, with that famous statement that was kind of caught on a hot mic between Xi and Putin. He said, we're witnessing historical processes.
Changes, yeah.
That wasn't conspiring. It wasn't scheming on the part of those 2. It means that they got to partake in observing something outside of what they were doing to make it happen.
Yeah.
But then you listen to Romney, they're so up their own arse. The heads are so up their own arses that they're completely misreading this. They think this is all a subjective process that is being done to us. So in their logic, if we stop Putin in Ukraine, that'll lead to stopping China. He implied China with respect to Taiwan, but he's thinking in terms of geoeconomics. That'll keep a lid on China's rise economically. But no, there's no logical sequence there. That logic is totally flawed, but they are so goddamn committed to it. I don't know what to say. That's why people are left to go, maybe there's something else they know that we don't know. Like, what is the game plan? They're so sure that Ukraine is going to solve the problem they see coming, the rise of BRICS and all these other countries. But
Yeah, it's got to be delusional, but they're also making a lot of money, you know.
right, the short-termism of it is what fuels it. Yeah, they're just making shitloads of money, and they come up with a logic like he just articulated. That's not fair. They're all saying the same basic thing, you know, and it kind of gets to the truth, but there's still a lot of ellipses to really flesh it out for people. We're making money while it's good. We're not losing. There's no, and they think that people should really get behind this. There's no American body bags, you know. Come on, it's only 5% of our military budget. It's not. There are a lot of other hidden costs, inflation, and they have expressly tied that. You notice how that's dropped off a cliff. A year ago, inflation was being blamed on Putin and him starting this war, and people did not buy that bullshit 1 second in the United States, so they quickly shut up about making that connection. But it is connected. It is definitely connected to global markets, the increase in the prices generally. A war anywhere is a disrupting factor. This is not just another war and a global war on terror, which were mostly, you know, turkey shoots. This is an actual, honest to God, near two peer nations, like full out war where 500,000, 1 million people are going to die, kind of thing. With vast amounts of money and material thrown into it. Yeah. Cutting a chunk out of, well, Germany's gone into recession. Yeah. Their GDP.
Yeah, it's almost like, you know, conditions on the planet, you know, aren't favourable either to the economic situation. Obviously, there is climate change. It's not really, doesn't really have anything to do with human CO2 emissions. Kind of a natural process, and that happens cyclically. But it means that, you know, there are hard times for the human population on the planet, in terms of obviously disruption or in climate and formerly stable climate patterns means you have a lot of problems for growing. Can have a lot of problems for growing crops, and the supply of crops, supply of food, and commodities go up, and all sorts of prices go up because of a shortage, basically. You know, can be derailed pretty quickly. But the problem is the politicians in the process of that happening are making it worse. They're doing everything possible to make it worse. All of their actions, while they claim the contrary, are appear designed to make it worse.
Yeah.
To exacerbate it. So it's like they just want to run the train off the rails, basically.
And take while the going's good.
Right, because there's a lot of money being made.
Because they too sense that it will go off the rails.
Yeah.
But the trick, the selling trick to people is that you give us some money and we'll keep everything on the rails. But they know, they go home and they're like, this is going off the rails. I'm going to get everything I can while I can.
Yeah.
What did you make of the statement by the Russian deputy ambassador to the UN? We just heard Mitt Romney say, this war is great for us. No Americans are dying. But this guy's saying, oh, wouldn't be so sure about that. Obviously, there have been volunteers, you know, mercenaries, and some people who are Americans and other Western troops who it's kind of dubious how they all quit the military, like within the last year, and suddenly popped up as a volunteer in Ukraine. But there probably aren't that many of them. But this here relates to like generals, senior people in Western militaries dying in Ukraine. Polyansky says, he gives 3 examples. The French have found a new scenario for legalizing the deaths of their top military in Ukraine. So there's the claim that they are dying in Ukraine. Reporting the death of, for example, General Georges Alain, former chief of staff of the French armed forces, during an unexpected hike in the mountains. That's true. That was reported last week. The 75-year-old general was on a hike in the Pyrenees alone and fell somewhere from high up. Then he gives a couple of other examples as well. An American one down towards the end. On August 1st, General Potts of the U.S. Armed Forces died in Maryland. He was flying alone on a private plane which crashed. And a few months ago, a, quote, helicopter crashed in the mountains of Mexico with a group of officers who were most likely planning to visit the Vinnytsia House of Officers the day before. Vinnytsia is in western Ukraine. I checked into that story as well, and I can't find like anything that would be a. I did find something, but it seems far-fetched to me. Like, so there was a Russian airstrike on this place in western Ukraine, Vinnytsia, which the Russians at the time reported had taken out a whole bunch of Ukrainian officers. They didn't mention NATO or foreign. But you can see what he's doing there. He's ... He's trying to throw out a seed there that we know who else was in that airstrike in western Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And he's tying it to the death of this General Potts. Now, he really did. Well, the news reports did say that he was flying alone in Maryland. Something went wrong with the plane and he crashed. It's still under investigation. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you see what happened there. Twitter community notes people, they fact check it to say, no. Here's a story of each of these cases, and they just died as reported. I don't know. A 75-year-old general leading anything in Ukraine, that sounds too old. Mm-hmm. In parallel, what's odd about the French guy, Georges Alain, is that his official current role, he's retired military, 75, was that he was leading the restoration of the Notre Dame Cathedral operation in Paris, which is frantically underway to try and get it reopened next year in time for the Paris Olympics. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. That's
suspicious.
It's suspicious, but maybe not for the reason he's suggesting. But then why would he say it? He's deputy ambassador for Russia. He's speaking as an official. I mean, the comments all underneath were like, dude, put the vodka away. You know, you've been drinking too much. But I don't think I can just dismiss it as that. It's a long post and he's got specific details in it. Like he's connected a few dots for people and put it out there. Now, that's usually, if it's conspiracy mongering, I mean, that's the stuff of psyops people. That's what shitheads who work for the CIA and the Pentagon as sock puppets do all the time online. But they do it incognito. They don't have the deputy U.S. ambassador to the UN connect the dots and put the conspiracy theory out there. You know what I mean? That's why I don't know what to do here. I've got a dissonance. I would toss it out, but he's not a nobody, you know?
Right. Yeah.
By your silence, I'm thinking you're saying, yeah, I can't touch that.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Speaking of BRICS and the new scramble for Africa and geoeconomics, Niger has expelled the French ambassador this week. Well, it gave him 48 hours to leave. And Macron's government said, no.
We are not leaving.
So we'll see what happens there. Yeah. I think something will kick off in Africa, West Africa, with ECOWAS.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. I don't think the balls do it. I think the tide's turning there.
Do you think maybe they're overstretched? Because if it is all systems go for Ukraine, they just can't. That would be new. That would be a development. If nothing happens, it would be new.
America has no more weapons to supply to them. Give them all to Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's part of the problem.
They may actually have physically reached the limits.
I don't think there's a political will either. Like, you know what I mean? When I see several African countries, not just they're aligning with Russia. It's not about aligning with Russia. It's about aligning with independence and independence from the colonial past and their colonial masters, you know, in France and in the US and stuff, you know. And obviously, majority of that message of breaking the chains of colonialism would resonate with a lot of the African people as well and stuff, So it's not that easy for governments just to kind of like turn around, and, the quisling governments aligned with the West to just turn around and say we're going to invade Niger or we're going to invade, these other countries that are bucking the trend, when all of your population probably. Or that inter-African nation-state war, how's that gonna go and how long is that gonna last? You know what I mean? So it's part of the wins. It's a part of this move towards creating a new world, like we were just talking about, a new multipolar world, and I think increasingly people are seeing that change happening, and people who have a vested interest. I mean, most African countries, in terms of their populations and their social infrastructure, have a lot to gain from that. So it's going to be really a real psycho hard man in an African country is going to double down and say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to go for modernization with the help of Russia and China. We're going to stick with our colonial masters, and y'all are going to stay in the mud.
And we're going to stick with our colonial franc.
Yeah. Really?
Controlled by the Bank of France in Paris.
I don't think there's much chance of anything significant happening in that respect, and it's just another step or another stage in the change of the kind of world order. It's another nail in America's coffin, effectively. And the West's coffin, particularly France.
France, the nuclear energy. That's why Niger is so important.
Well, they're going but of course the end result will be that energy prices in France will go up. It'll be passed on. The French government will do a deal basically where they keep getting uranium from Niger and other countries in Africa, but they'll have to pay a fair price for it, rather than get it for free, more or less.
Yeah.
So that guy Yuval Harari. What do you know about him? He's this dude who just pops up for some reason. Has popped up over the past few years around COVID and all the places.
His book made him famous.
His book about
Homo sapiens.
Right.
I mean, talk about
a brief history of humankind. Yeah.
Like a brief history. The book is it claims to be the be all and end all of the species.
Like he reinvented
where we're
the
from, where we're going. Yeah. The whole anyone who aims that high is
Look, well, I never liked him because he was hanging out with World Economic Forum people, and he's talking about he was basically on board with the idea in general of you'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
Yeah.
And there's no such thing as free will, and people don't need their brains. Basically, what do people need to think anyway? Let's just feed them food through a tube, and they'll be happy.
Computer games.
So he wrote this just a couple of days ago. From a biological perspective, nothing is unnatural. Whatever is possible is by definition also natural. A truly unnatural behavior, one that goes against the laws of nature, simply cannot exist. So it would need no prohibition. So he's a kind of a Aleister Crowley type, I suppose. Aleister Crowley would find common cause with him. Do what I will shall be the whole of the law type thing. Just let it all hang out. Whatever you want to do, let it go. No rules, no nothing. Of course, from a biological perspective. But, is he just saying from a biological perspective? But, of course, we're not just biological. But he tends to suggest that we are just biological. His whole thrust seems to be that people are just meat sacks, basically. And, so and he's a gay vegan. Gay is really Jew vegan. And I think he's a psychopath. So that's all I have to say about him.
Yeah. It's good. It's useful to have.
This guy's been faded. You know what I mean?
I know.
He's been given airtime. This perspective is being pushed on people.
It's being pushed, but it also actually resonates with a lot of people. His book Homo Sapiens, before he became famous or infamous for his statements around COVID, and how we can use the pandemic to
change the world,
change people's minds, control their brains and stuff. He was already #1 bestseller, with that book.
Mm-hmm.
I heard about it through a family member. Said you got to check out this book. It's amazing.
Right. Well, that's a red flag.
Like he picked it up in an airport. Was promoted, is pushed out there. But it syncs with people. It's scary. But he's useful because he articulates the atheist's worldview. He fleshes it out. Like logically, if there's no God, if there's no morality, where are you going with this?
Mm-hmm.
And he's useful because he articulates.
Yeah. Well,
and it gives people a clearer choice in that matter, choice, or there's no choice for them. There's no free will, I suppose. They really believe that.
Well, like queer, vegan, Jewish atheists can make the argument that they want that human beings are meat sacks, and they don't have free will, and they should just be fed by a tube and have virtual reality headset playing video games all the time, and be turned into batteries like in the Matrix, basically. He can make that argument all he wants, but he's first, and it only applies to him and anybody else who wants to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You speak for yourself, Yuval. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You certainly don't speak for me. So just go fuck yourself. So
Is COVID coming back, Joe?
no,
Go on.
no, there's no chance.
Alex Jones predicts, two insiders told him it's coming back
The queer frogs.
by December. The masks, the lockdowns, the new vaccine. No.
I don't think so. It's gonna have to be. There's gonna have to be some. It's not gonna be. It can't be just based on the new bullshit variant or something like that. I mean, they'll have to actually have
Scary stuff.
another actual virus to bring that back. They're not bringing back COVID like
Okay.
SARS-CoV-2 is nothing. It's a nothing burger. It always was effectively more or less a nothing burger. Initially, it just took a bit of time to kind of for people to get used to it, and a few people who were in ill health. In the same way that a new strain of the flu would have done the same, that those people died, but there was a bit of a spike in deaths, but not a lot. But it was always a nothing burger, and it's even more of a nothing burger now, obviously, after the mutations, which are always deleterious, right? They always reduce the function of the virus to the point that it just becomes endemic, and it's just another seasonal virus if it even shows its head again, So, yeah, and you'll have new variants. You can pick up, you can do that forever, there's a new variant of COVID this year. Well, COVID's going to make it. You remember COVID? Remember it was deadly? Well, this really, reduced innocuous variant 3 years or 4 years or 6 years later. It's what? It's a seasonal flu. It's just like a seasonal cold or flu virus. But it's COVID. So we're going to lock down? No.
What if they don't even need a reason to lock down anymore? Look, this is a headline from this week. School districts in Kentucky, Texas cancel classes amid, quote, surge of illnesses, including COVID.
Oh, so a surge of illnesses, including... So COVID's one of many illnesses, and they're locking... So now you lock down because COVID was the new...
Now you
the
just
new
lock
normal?
down because anything might happen.
Because I got an owie?
What if that would work? What if on some people, they don't even need a scary virus
Well, then they
anymore?
deserve to lock down. The only people who would lock down in that situation are people who want to. And they're happier that way. So stay in your house. You know what? It'll be a lot happier for the rest of us walking around the streets if you're fucking stuck in your house, because you're obviously an arsehole and you just annoy people when you're out in town anyway. So stay at home.
Yeah, I agree. It's like when
Get them off the streets.
When they rail about climate change, the problem is there's too many people. That's really what they're getting at.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you don't believe in an afterlife anyway. This is all there is. You're just a meat sack. You're the problem for the planet. So
Jump off a cliff.
help us.
Or at least stop driving your car and stay at
You
home.
first.
Stop driving your car, stop eating meat and stay at home.
Yeah.
And
watch
eat
Yuval
lentils.
Harari endlessly on TED Talks.
Yeah. Yeah. Do that. I mean, why they have to apply it to everybody else? It's just like... the fact they don't realise that they're going to get pushback from trying to impose their perspectives, their radically different perspectives on other people is bizarre. Like, what part of free will did you not understand? Oh, sorry, Yuval Harari said we don't have any free will. Therefore, we should all just go with the current thing, right? What a retard. How is that guy,
Fated.
how is he given a platform? Who's giving him a platform? Who wants his message to be promoted to the population? Who are these people, Neil? The Illuminati, is that what you're going to say?
Alien-human hybrids.
Right, that'll do. Well, fuck them too.
They're preparing us so that they can move in and just take over.
Right, yeah. Good luck. Do your worst.
Oh.
Do your worst, we have already won.
I love how, 20 years later, you kind of get an I told you so moment. This is one for you. This is Joe's I told you so.
It's too easy to get I told you so's these days.
You don't get any of the credit. not officially. Well, you get it from me, and
What's
the
it-
commenters here should a round of applause, please, for Joe.
that-
Associated Press. Judge orders release of 3 of Newburgh 4 and accuses FBI of, quote, trolling for terrorists.
yeah.
Joe wrote about this case when it broke in 2011, but he was even writing about earlier
A
fake
bunch of other
FBI
ones.
terror
I did a
plots.
SOT report at the time on it,
Yeah.
an actual video presentation about all those cases. So,
And you wrote about it. Let me just read some of it. 3 men convicted in a post 9/11 terrorism sting were ordered freed from prison by a judge who deemed their sentences unduly harsh and unjust, and decried the role of the FBI in radicalizing them in a plot to blow up New York synagogues and shoot down National Guard planes. Look at the words she used. Onto Williams. Oh, that's not her. These are the guys, 2 brothers, Williams, Laguerre, Payne. 3 of the men known as the Newburgh 4 were, quote, hapless. You used that term when you wrote about it. Hapless dupes. Were hapless, easily manipulated, and penurious, dirt poor, petty criminals. In a scheme, they were roped into a scheme driven by overzealous FBI agents and a dodgy informant, the district judge Colleen McMahon said Thursday. The real lead conspirator was the United States. What happened to them was heinous. It was a government's made-for-TV movie. The sentence was the product of a fictitious plot to do things that these men had never remotely contemplated, and that were never going to happen.
yeah.
The informant in this case was an Arab American. Is he named there? Probably is named further down there. But whatever. I have him in the next article I've just sent you, Scotty. This Looper, he went on to start a limo business. That's it. Well, that's his son, Nauman Hussein. That's him crying there in court in a recent case. The son of the informant is convicted of manslaughter in this Skohari limo case. This is the single worst fatality for a road accident, traffic accident in the United States ever. Something like 25 people were killed because this guy's party limo was speeding and careened down a mountain. His daddy set him up with that business, with the cash he was getting from the FBI, to entrap dirt poor, hapless dupes, mentally not all there in the head.
Mm-hmm.
And he went on, this Hussein informant, I mean, he's involved in a number of the other cases as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Miami 7 as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely insane. But there you go. They eventually, I suppose they got the informant at least got his just desserts. He ended up after, killing 25 people accidentally.
Yeah.
Got his just desserts. But then the US government is condemned by a judge 15 years later as being the villain, her word, in the case, and it'll just carry on. But it's interesting that legally it is now the villain. That whole war on terror is underpinned by those FBI fake FBI terror plots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just here's your. This is actually it's a flashback in 2009. If you just put it up there, scary picture. So I wrote that. Well, that was a flashback in 2009. So I think I wrote it in 2006 or something, or 2007. Anyway, if you scroll down, you can see the. That's the Miami terror cell on the left. Well, I was given a bunch of different examples of one such case was that of the Miami terror cell back in 2006. The slightly deranged group of 5 Christian Zionist Muslim martial art immigrants called the Sea of David were quietly living in a warehouse in Florida awaiting the fulfillment of the biblical end times prophecy when one day an undercover FBI agent came along and offered them 50 grand, initiated them into Al-Qaeda, provided them with military boots and video camera, and suggested that they wanted to blow up certain government buildings and the Sears Tower in Chicago. And I think they were the ones that also suggested to them that they wanted to wage a full ground war on the US.
Full-scale ground war.
Full-scale ground war on the US. And then, the article goes on, but I have a bunch of other There's another one, 5 Miami men convicted of Sears Tower plot. Well, that was the same one. And then there's another one. I wrote a bunch because it was happening so much, you know. But the title of this one, which was 2010, 13 years ago, highlights the point of it, you know. I mean, if you just scroll down, you can see, I just have them listed there: homegrown terrorist plot number 1, homegrown terrorist plot number 2, keep going, homegrown terrorist plot number 4, number 5. But the title of it, legislating away your freedoms, one homegrown terrorist at a time, was the point that we could see, and I could see, we could see anyway at the time. So we're talking, not just 14, but we're talking this beforehand. So like up to pretty much 20 years ago, the point of these terror plots that now is being admitted that they were put up jobs by the FBI. The point of it, there's always several points. One of them is for the FBI to justify its
Budget
existence and its budget in the context of there's a war on terror and there's a terrorist threat in America. You better start fighting terrorists. But the end result, the broader result, was that it progressively was used to erode, increase government control and passing of laws that infringed civil liberties in the US and around the world by extension. Basically taking people's freedom away. That was ultimately what happened as a result of it. And we were trying to tell people at the time when these were coming out that this is where it's going. And then, the culmination of it almost 20 years afterwards is, for example, something like COVID, where the government can put out messaging. There's such a climate of fear promoted by the government that induces a kind of dependence on government that when they launch something like COVID, they have a population that's been so conditioned that they immediately follow all of the dictates that the government says, regardless of how ridiculous and punitive and unnecessary they were.
That couldn't have happened without
all of the whole terrorism business since 9/11.
Yeah.
And obviously beforehand.
And it changed. On the legal level, it obviously impacted, but that has more than just the effects of what you can and can't do, because in your mind, your mind changes as well. It changes the culture. The Project Veritas doxing or whatever undercover reporting on that CNN technical director, 20 years prior or even 10 prior, that would have been bombshell. He'd have been fired. There would have been an investigation, at least a superficial, because everyone knew, even in those verified circles at CNN HQ and in Manhattan, where Zucker meets the other execs and their councils and they discuss what agenda they're going to push. They all know you can't do that. You're not supposed to be seen to do that. But the culture's changed so much that lying and actually articulating that your plan is to lie for money or clicks or to spread fear.
Nobody cares.
That's business as usual. Fine. He told her that matter-of-factly. He wasn't afraid that she was Project Veritas and that when that got out, he would lose his job.
It's just known. It's common knowledge, right?
It changed things culturally. It changed people's brains.
But it's too
literally.
late. The problem is it's too late.
Yeah.
We tried to warn people repeatedly at the time, but it was too late because no one believes. When it's happening, when it's in a process, we've had this kind of foresight where we had this idea that things were going to go in a bad direction, and then we saw all of these different events happening that were setting up that course of direction over the next X number of years, and we just tried to publish stuff about it and tell people what's going on. But when people look around, they don't see it happening. It's like while you're being conditioned and prepared, you don't notice it. It's only when the conditioning and the programming in a certain sense is complete, then the hammer comes down or the door comes down and you're locked in. But it's too late at that point. So you have to have seen it beforehand and seen where it was going in order to, at the very least, and at the most important level, in fact, protect yourself psychologically from it, to not believe the lies. But so many people have swallowed the lies for so long, they now are, part of their DNA is lies, basically. You know what I mean? So they don't notice them when it's normal.
Ukrainian.
Well, it's the water they swim in.
Yeah.
Like fish, So anyway, I think we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
For this week.
Right, so.
It's been going on long enough, almost not far off 2 hours, so we got to call it quits. I have one joke. Did you hear that they arrested the devil?
Stop.
Yeah. They got him on possession. Anyway, we're going to leave it there for this week, folks. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for commenting and for watching, well, in general. We'll be back next week with another show. And our camera's super blurry. Is that just for us? Anyway, we'll be back next week with another show. Until then, have a good one. See you later.
Thanks for watching. Bye, all.
Can't stop the signal now.